how India and the United States are going to be boosting their defense partnership, especially with a boost for the indigenous Tejas. Right now, we're also going to be telling you more key details that were highlighted in the joint statement that was issued post that bilateral. Now, there are 10 specific points that we're going to be focusing on. The first one is that India and the United States, they're committed to a free, open, inclusive, and resilient Indo-Pacific. Now, when it comes to the Indo-Pacific, this is a relatively new term that's come up in the last decade or so, and specifically because when it comes to the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean, the link that's there is more about the strategic theater that is offered in this area. Next, the point that we want to take a look at is that global governance must be more inclusive and representative. This is something that Prime Minister Modi has also constantly been highlighting. Now, remember, he had also written a blog post just a few days ahead of the G20 summit where he had stated that it's very important for everybody to realize that actually he had said that there was a growing realization for the fact that when it comes to governance, it needs to shift away from being GDP-centric and must be more human-centric. Now, the next point that we want to take a look at when it comes to the joint statement is that and this is a very key point here, the United States backs India's permanent membership in a reformed UNSC. But this is not necessarily new because the US has already backed India's permanent membership at the UNSC. Now, beyond this, the next point that we also want to tell you more about is that the G20 will advance sustainable development goals. When it comes to the G20, typically there are three things that the G20 tends to focus on annually. One is that they are going to move towards towards better sustainable development goals. Then you also have climate change mitigation as well, which is on the cards. Beyond this, when we come to the joint statement, let's take a look at the next point that we want to focus on. One other key statement that's been made is that technology plays a defining role in deepening strategic ties. So that's also going to be interesting because during the bilateral, Prime Minister Modi and United States President Biden, they also talked about using artificial intelligence to boost ties between the two nations. Now, when it comes to point number 6, the United States has congratulated Team ISRO for Chandrayaan-3. Now, this is also particularly important because this was a massive milestone for ISRO. India became not only just the 4th nation to land on the moon, but the first ever nation with this mission to land on the moon's South Pole. Now, the next point in the joint statement that we'll get you a look at is that the two nations are planning on building a resilient supply chain when it comes to the semiconductor sector. Now, this is also particularly important. This was also emphasized when the Prime Minister visited the United States earlier this year. And later on, we're also going to be seeing a few more factories when it comes to the semiconductor market. Those are specifically also going to be built in India. Now, shifting focus to the next point that we want to highlight is support for women in the digital economy initiative. So that gender divide was also something that was addressed by both of the leaders of the two nations. Beyond this, let's take a look at point number 9 when it comes to the joint statement that was issued. Both nations are committed to cooperation in the quantum domain. Another key point here that was made. Beyond this, the last point that we want to give you more information about is that both nations have reaffirmed their need to strengthen and reform the multilateral system. But why exactly was that important? Because multilateralism over the last few years has typically been on the decline. But over here, you have India and the United States reaffirming their need to strengthen and reform the multilateral system.